It's no secret that Tribeca is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in all of New York City. Actually, just a few years ago, Tribeca was the most expensive neighborhood in New York City, but it recently got beat out by Hudson Yards. But it's still a very close call, and it's still a very, very pricey neighborhood. So how do you afford living in such an expensive neighborhood like this? It's always hard to find deals in New York City. It doesn't really matter where you are nowadays, and honestly, it's across almost all boroughs right now. There are little things that you can do in New York City and specifically in Tribeca to try to get a little bit of a better deal. Let's break down the neighborhood of Tribeca. If you take a look at Tribeca on the map, you're going to see that it pretty much stretches all the way from Broadway to the West Side Highway. The further west you are in Tribeca, the more expensive it is. Why is that? Because you're closer to the waterfront. It's beautiful for one, and it's easier to get in and out of the neighborhood from that part of the city. Now let's break down Tribeca north to south. The northern part of Tribeca that is bordering Soho is going to be more expensive than the southern part of Tribeca that's bordering the financial district. So if you're looking to be in Tribeca, but don't have this crazy budget to play around with, you're going to want to look at places in the southern part of Tribeca and more inland. The closer you go to the actual street of Broadway, the cheaper the rent is going to be typically. I say Broadway. Do not get that confused with West Broadway. West Broadway is a separate avenue in Tribeca. I want you to pay close attention to that because a lot of people confuse them at first, especially if they're not used to downtown Manhattan, where West Broadway does exist. And they use the words interchangeably, even though they're two very, very different avenues. So I want you to pay attention to that because West Broadway is very, very expensive. But Broadway, just Broadway in Tribeca is where it's going to be a little bit cheaper. Now, I say a little bit cheaper because there are still very, very pricey places around this part of the neighborhood, but it's going to be more likely to find a deal in this part of the neighborhood. I always suggest when somebody's trying to find a deal in a New York City apartment that they look off market as much as possible. What do I mean by looking off market? Most of the time, when somebody's looking for a brand new apartment, whether they're looking to rent or buy, they go to StreetEasy. And StreetEasy is a great app. It's the on-market marketplace. And the problem with that is that everybody who's looking for a new apartment to rent or buy is going to be looking at the same exact apartments as you on StreetEasy. So the competition is fierce because there's so many people who are going to be looking as well there. So this is why I like to tell people to try to look off market first or simultaneously while you're looking on StreetEasy. That way you have more options. What do I mean by off market? If you're looking for a rental using the Facebook app, Facebook groups, Facebook Marketplace, this is a great place to look for off-market deals in New York City. Now, there are so many Facebook groups that focus on rentals in New York City. I do have to say, a lot of them do focus on lease takeovers, or if somebody's looking to take over a room with roommates. So it's going to be a little bit harder to find a regular lease on an app like Facebook or something like that, but it still can be done. There's another app that I like to use called Lease Break. If you are willing to take over a shorter lease, you can use an app like Lease Break, where somebody needs to get out of their lease because they need to move away somewhere else or something's happened in their life, and they're looking for somebody to take over their lease. Sometimes looking for somebody to take over a room, but other times they're looking for someone to take over the entire apartment. That's what you're looking for. Lease Break is a really, really great option for that, and I've seen a ton of great deals on Lease Break. I've personally used Lease Break both on the renter side and also as the person who was leasing out my apartment as well. So I can definitely vouch for this website. Another website that I like to use instead of StreetEasy is called Apartment Guide. Now, this isn't as common in New York City, but you may have heard of it or be a little bit familiar with it. Apartment Guide doesn't really list individual apartments, so if you have like one landlord with one unit, they're typically not on Apartment Guide. They can be, but it's not that common. It's a lot more common for big rental buildings to be on this Apartment Guide website. So if you're open to looking at bigger complexes, then this is going to be the website for you. I recommend to use this website over StreetEasy because sometimes certain rent promotions are more promoted on Apartment Guide, and it's actually easier to find incentives that these buildings use to get new tenants into their building. On StreetEasy, sometimes they list it in the description, but that's really the only place that they can do that. They don't really have ways to really filter it out and find that like they do with Apartment Guide, and that's why I love using Apartment Guide so much. There are some neighborhoods in New York City where it's easier to use Apartment Guide than others. There's not a ton of options in Tribeca, but if you do go into Tribeca and scroll around the neighborhood in the map section, you will be able to find some buildings and some apartment deals. And remember, when I say a deal for Tribeca, it's still going to be very expensive, but it's going to make it a little bit more affordable to live there. Another thing that is very, very common to do in expensive neighborhoods just like Tribeca is if you are open to living with roommates, for this kind of applies to rental specifically, but it could be for buying as well, then what you could do is you can rent out, say, a 2-bedroom apartment. And if the layout qualifies for this, and you can figure out how to add another bedroom within that layout, You can hire a company that does temporary walls in New York City. This is very, very common, and I've done it before. What you do is you hire this company, and they will basically create a fake bedroom. It's not a real bedroom, but somebody can live there. And this is a way that you can convert, say, like a 2-bedroom into a 3-bedroom. So now you have, instead of you and another roommate, you now have 3 roommates altogether, including yourself. So many people do this in Tribeca and other neighborhoods around New York City because it makes living in the neighborhood so much more affordable. Imagine you were paying $5,500 for a 2-bedroom in Tribeca, but you were able to make it into a 3-bedroom and split that with 3 people instead. Now it becomes way more affordable. And this is actually something my husband did when he first moved into New York City as well with his roommates. Tribeca is definitely a pricey neighborhood, but hopefully these ways will help you save a little bit of money in the neighborhood.